All right, I think we're good to go, Barbara.
All right. Good morning and welcome to the April quarterly meeting of the State Bar Council. Welcome to all the members of the council, our guests, and those members of the public that may be watching now or in the future. Just a reminder to everybody that we are now live streaming on the State Bar YouTube channel. So again, good morning. I'm going to start us off with sort of the mundane start to our business, which is reminding us of our duties with respect to conflicts. Members of the council are hereby advised of their duty under the State Government Ethics Act to avoid conflicts of interest in the appearance of conflict, and are instructed to refrain from participating in any matter coming before this council with respect to which there is a conflict of interest or appearance of conflict. Are there any conflicts to be noted at this time? Thank you, and if one arises, you can notify us by raising your hand virtually or in person or sending a message through the chat. We've received correspondence from the North Carolina State Ethics Commission relative to the statements of economic interest of the counselor, whose names are listed in an attachment to the agenda. And the State Ethics Commission has identified that all lawyer members of the State Bar Council have a potential conflict of interest because their service involves regulation of the legal profession of which they're members. The conflict must be recorded in the minutes of this body, and it's my duty to remind all lawyer members to be mindful of this potential conflict. Thank you. At this moment, I'd like to ask our Vice President, Marcy Armstrong, to open this meeting with the invocation.
Good morning and happy Friday. We can pray. May the peace of God dwell always in your hearts and in your home. May you have true friends to stand by you, both in joy and sorrow. May you be ready to help and console all of those who come to you in need. And may the blessings promised to the compassionate descend in abundance upon you and your family. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. So great words to start us with. Thank you. Before we get far into the meeting, I just wanted to say welcome. I think most of you have virtually met Davis Poisson, our new counselor. He's representing District 21, and as we've mentioned many times, his family has a long legacy of service to the State Bar. So we're glad to see that continue, and we welcome Davis.
Hey everyone, thank you.
I'm really excited about our first presentation, and I want to recognize Chief Justice Newby so that he can introduce our presenter. And before I do that, Chief Justice, I want to say that we often say on the council that we really feel like members of a family because we're together so much. And with that, we celebrate things that happen in our life, our joys and our concerns. And we understand that you have a sort of special joy to celebrate today, and that would be your anniversary. So happy anniversary. With that, I will turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And certainly one of the things that has always been a distinctive of our bar is its sense of family. We refer to court families, and certainly our partners, our business partners, but then the local bars themselves. So thank you for saying that. And let me congratulate everyone, particularly Mr. Poisson with his selection. As I've always said, I know of no higher honor than to have been selected by your peers as a State Bar counselor. I often question the sanity of the lawyers in Mecklenburg County for David Allen's selection, but other than that, it certainly appears to me to just really be a representative of really the best of our profession. So congratulations on that. Before I introduce Justice Earls in her presentation, Let me just very quickly give you a 30,000-foot overview, no parachutes provided, with regard to the profession. Once again, COVID sadly continues to be on the forefront. We continue to work with our COVID task force to try to discern best practices with regard to each local courthouse. And on the one hand, things have worked out as I had anticipated, which is some courts are back to having jury trials, others are not. I know all the stakeholders are working as hard as they can and as innovatively as they can to try to ensure that our state constitutional mandates are met, that the courts are open, and that justice is administered without favor or denial or delay. So from the COVID perspective, I issued the emergency or reissued the emergency order that I have the last several months. But we are looking very carefully to see, are there any aspects of that that can be relaxed based on the current science? And I just wanted to assure you of that. And we're working with your senior residents and chief district court judges and clerks and all the stakeholders with regard to that. The other big item is now in just over 90 days, the pilot districts are scheduled to go live on eCourts. And eCourts certainly involve a significant access to justice issue that we're going to be talking about, that Justice Earls will be leading the discussion on. But with regard to eCourts, the pilot districts will go live or scheduled to go live toward the end of July. That'd be Wake and Johnston, Harnett and Lee. 6 months later, Mecklenburg is scheduled to go live. So everything is progressing. There's one rule set that needs to be finally tweaked with regard to our rules of practice to help our rules and eCourts, e-technology work hand in hand. That's currently before our court, and once those rules are in place, the training videos and all the things that we as lawyers will need to properly access the system will be available, more training opportunities than, well, let me just say lots of training opportunities will be available. So another aspect of this and an aspect of access to courts has to do with guide and file. Guide and file is like TurboTax, except it's for various areas of the law. There's about a dozen different practice areas. I encourage you to go and look at that. The forms can be utilized by pro se individuals, but they can be utilized by lawyers as well. Right now, it's a guide and print. But with eCourts, it'll be guide and file. The idea is there'll be a kiosk in courthouses, but people could do it from their own computers to go online, find basic forms, and then be able to file those with the clerks. So this past month, first time we have surpassed 10,000 hits on the guide and file site. And 7% of the respondents or the people who used it were willing to respond to a survey. And of those, about 70% said it was either easy or very easy. And certainly that's our goal, is to make that available. With regard to our pro bono, last month was pro bono service month. And while we didn't have quite as many folks respond that they had provided pro bono hours, it was a small number less. We did have more than 14,000, let me say that again, 14,000 hours more than we had the previous year. I still think that the bar significantly underreports their actual pro bono hours, and I continue to encourage folks to please report those hours. All those things being said, and I think this segues into Justice Earls' presentation. Justice Earls has been a long time and may have been a charter member of the North Carolina Equal Access to Justice Commission. Justice Earls is the chairperson of a committee that was designated to look into the unmet legal needs of folks across North Carolina, both of middle income as well as low income folks. She will be discussing with you the findings of that survey, and also will be telling you where you can access the survey itself, as well as the actual presentation of the survey was presented a week ago, and that was recorded and is available. That being said, Justice Earls, we appreciate all your work that you put into equal access to justice for all citizens of our state. I will leave you to present that. I have other responsibilities today, so I will be needing to leave the meeting. But again, thank you for each of you and the sacrifices that you make to serve our profession the way that you do. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Chief Justice Newby, for that kind introduction. And I want to thank everyone for being interested in this legal needs study that the Equal Justice Alliance and the Equal Access to Justice Commission has been working on for the past year and a half. I'm going to share my screen. I also have my chat window open, so if you have questions as I go along, please ask them, and I will do my best to kind of monitor it and answer as I go along. So the study we've just released the results of a work that really began over a year and a half ago. Our first two meetings were actually in person before the pandemic forced us to be virtual. What I first want to make sure you're aware of is that everything I'm telling you, as well as a lot more detail about the study, is available on the website that has been set up that covers exclusively all the work looking at legal needs in North Carolina. So nclegalneeds.org is the phrase to remember. You can see the executive summary. There's also an interactive story map that's scroll down, and there is narrative and maps and data that goes into a little more depth. But then I think one thing that you might find helpful in a number of contexts are the county profiles. So on that website, for all 100 counties in North Carolina is an 11-page document. You can view it on screen, you can download it. It has census data on factors relevant to legal needs and the population served by our legal services programs. But then it also has AOC court data for the types of cases that legal services providers work in. So you can look, and this is 5-year annualized court data. So from 2015 to 2019, you can see how many domestic violence cases, how many summary ejectment, how many other types of cases that legal services works in were handled by at the various levels in each county. And so I think it's a wealth of information and resources county by county, because there is a lot of variation across our state. The steering committee members, as you can see, were a wide cross-section of stakeholders. And of course, we are enormously grateful that the State Bar gave us a liaison in Darren Jordan. And this steering committee really worked closely with our researchers who were from UNC Greensboro. The point of doing this study was to really, we all know that the need is greater than our ability to serve it. But we wanted to know a lot more about what kinds of issues are being have the greatest unmet need, and what are some of the barriers to meeting that need. And I'll just say that while the full report has some of, so there's a large survey. I hope that some of you actually participated in answering that survey, which asks questions about what are the needs you see in your community. But in addition, there are some recommendations by the survey respondents of what could be done differently. But the report itself is really a report on data. So the ultimate questions of how we address what this data tells us is still up to all of us, and that's where we need all of you. So the goals were to document the current resources and then to understand the gaps in services. Some quick overview of what we know about the situation in North Carolina. And I didn't include the slide, but the population in North Carolina is growing faster than the national population. So we now are in a situation where over 2 million low-income North Carolinians are actually eligible by virtue of their income for the services of legal aid providers. Of those folks, 71% of low-income families will have at least one civil legal problem in any given year. 86% of those legal needs go unmet. If you just sort of look at what are the resources available, there's one legal aid attorney for every 8,000 North Carolinians compared to one private lawyer for every 367 residents. So that's kind of the a snapshot of where the disparity, how great the disparity is. So the UNCG researchers, as I said, looked at data from 2015 to 2019 for 26 civil issue case types. So these are the types that legal services providers work in. So this doesn't include personal injury cases, antitrust, the other areas where our state courts look at or have cases. And the other important thing to note is that much of the work of legal services providers is not actually in state court. So a lot of benefits work, for example, might be federal court work, unemployment benefits, there's administrative tribunals. So to the extent that we were looking at court data to get a comparison of the need, we're actually only looking at a small slice of the need. Then the primary findings. So unanimously, we know that low-income North Carolinians face a severe shortfall in access to legal resources. Some of the resources have expanded in the past 20 years, but the growth in the need has outpaced the growth in resources. So the gap is getting bigger, is the big picture takeaway. And then we try to identify if there were certain populations that are underserved, even relative to this bigger picture of everyone who's eligible not getting services. And I will say that we did not break that down by race and ethnic group, but we did identify veterans as an underserved population, even relative to the larger population. And the other thing to note is that the income limits, so the population we're talking about, the income limits imposed by LSC actually does not include middle income folks for whom they often are also not able to afford the services of a private attorney. So there's just many ways in which even this look underestimates the need. So not surprisingly, legal aid providers turn away a lot of people who are eligible. Family law, and especially custody proceedings, was most often mentioned in our surveys as an area where there's an underserved population. And the second, interestingly, was immigration and immigration-related issues. And then the researchers found that routine practice areas like expunctions and traffic law have a potential to impact the ability to be economically self-sufficient. The 91.2% of clients named the cost of legal services as a barrier to them being able to access the information that they needed. Lack of internet access, and that's both in rural and low-income communities, is a challenge. And I think that obviously became even more true as the pandemic forced more service providers to be working through online means. So what are just a few of the numbers? Almost 1.5 North Carolinians live in poverty. That's 15% of the state's population. And there is a racial disproportionality. So 23.5% of Black households are in poverty, whereas 12.1% of white households are. Another way to measure what resources people have available to get legal advice is to look at how much disposable income they have. 20.7% of homeowners and almost half, 44.1% of renters, spend more than 30% of their income just on housing, which then obviously limits what they have for other needs. So in this, what this map looked at was just the number of civil cases, going back to that AOC data and just the types of cases that legal services providers work in, that it does vary around the state. And I think one interesting thing about this graphic, which shows you county by county, the number of civil cases per 10,000 population, is that the number doesn't necessarily correlate to our biggest urban areas. So Wake County isn't in that highest category of blue, but Nash, Edgecombe, and Wilson is. And so the needs and the rate of civil cases can be higher even in some areas where the population isn't as high. So what are our legal services providers doing? Those 8 agencies closed 33,805 cases. They served almost 100,000 individuals, 2,000 veterans. They prevented almost 2,000 evictions and 284 foreclosures, assisted clients in 3,186 domestic violence cases, 680 individuals receiving expunctions, and 38% of their cases were either domestic violence or landlord-tenant issues. This was 2019 data. I think what's interesting is how that compares to some measure of the need. So while they prevented almost 2,000 evictions, that's only 1.1% of the 170,000 summary ejectment actions that were filed. And this is annually, but looking over a 5-year period. The 284 foreclosures were only 1.2% of the 23,000 foreclosure actions filed. In domestic violence, in the domestic violence arena, 8.9% of the orders obtained is, of the orders obtained there, 8.9% of the total domestic violence actions filed. So you really here, I think, get a sense of the magnitude of the gap between the types of cases that are coming through our courts and the cases in which legal services providers are able to provide representation. So it's not surprising then that people say the cost of having an attorney is the biggest barrier. Others identified the fact that the legal processes can take so long. People are reluctant to search out an attorney because they don't think their case will matter to a lawyer, and then because they'll have to miss work. And then the researchers identified the ways in which residents of rural areas have additional barriers, such as no public transport and the longer distances they would have to travel to access a legal aid office. Legal services are also hard for people to access because of a low level of trust in lawyers. So the survey residents, the clients surveys, the average on this scale of 0 to 100 in trust was 63.6%, which is good. It's better than 50, but those with lowest ability to access legal services had the lowest level of trust in lawyers. So veterans only 57.59% on that scale. And then, so just giving a big picture overview, the areas with high need, housing issues, family, immigration, issues particularly affecting seniors, healthcare, income maintenance, consumer rights, employment, civil rights, veterans, educational services, disability, wills, and estates. And I think the significant thing about these 14 categories is that these are all about basic needs: shelter, food, your ability to access education, just really basic needs where people need representation. So what can you do? We've identified 3 broad things. I think you can probably think of more, but obviously volunteering. So the pro bono, I think that what this gap illustrates is how crucial the pro bono work really is. But then also knowing about this and letting other folks know and understand the importance of the difference that legal advice and assistance can make, I think is crucial. And then obviously supporting the legal services providers that in the great work that they are doing by donating and encouraging others to donate. So I have to thank North Carolina IOLTA and the Bar Foundation for providing the funding. This study was something that was in the charter for when the Equal Access Justice Commission was first created. And it's really been a long time in the making to be able to do a study like this. And we're, of course, grateful to the Center for Housing and Community Studies at UNCG, who we were fortunate to have researchers who had previously conducted research during a pandemic. So when we had to go online, they were able to adapt their research methods. We did focus groups by Zoom, and they were really able to continue the work even with the pandemic. And I'll say, that the main takeaway about what the impact of the pandemic will be on all this data is that it just vastly increases the need. Obviously evictions and housing related issues, as well as the income support and maintenance, all of that, we are beginning to see how that is filtering through the demand for services. And as one legal service provider said, before the pandemic, their clients could find a lifeline. They could find a way to get through, and the pandemic kind of just took that away. So I will stop sharing my screen here, and I don't see any questions in the chat, but I'm certainly open, time permitting, to try to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Any questions of Justice Earls? It's really a lot to absorb. So I can assure you that this data will be used. We have a lot of committees right now that are studying what we can do as a regulatory agency to help improve that gap in legal services. And it's just great to have this data. So our thanks to the committee and all the hard work. This is really wonderful. I've had a chance to review it, and it's comprehensive and sobering all at the same time. So I hope everybody will look at it. Mary Irvine posted the link, another link. So
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, well, thank you all.
Okay, our next person I'd like to recognize is Mel Wright, who is the Executive Director of the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism. And Mel is going to talk to us about an initiative of this committee and how we can support it. So Mel, welcome.
Thank you very much, Barbara. I'm glad to be with you this morning. First of all, I'd like to thank Barbara, also Kevin Williams, Mark Henriquez, Daryl Davison, all are volunteers and helping with the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism, and we appreciate that. I was asked to talk briefly today about our Professionalism Support Initiative. It's a confidential peer intervention program that I guess actually the idea for it started 20-some years ago when I was on the executive committee of the Forsyth County Bar. We had a practicing lawyer who was a sole practitioner and had an office in Forsyth County and an office in an adjoining county. He hired an advertising agency, which was a very talented group. They did some wonderful, catchy ads for him. His business picked up dramatically, but he couldn't take care of all of his business. He couldn't be in 2 counties at the same time. So people were constantly complaining about him. The only thing that we knew to say to him, it seemed at the time, was, well, if you're upset with your lawyer, contact the state bar. So the complaints would be sent to the state bar. but a rule was not necessarily violated, so the state bar would find no probable cause. We were still dealing with his disgruntled clients, trying to figure out what we could do to help. And one of the members of the executive committee said, well, why don't I go visit with him? And we said, wow, would you be willing to do that? He said, well, it can't hurt, might help. And it did help. So I brought that idea to Raleigh when we started the Commission on Professionalism, and basically started the program with the idea that if the state bar has a problem, but a rule is not violated, then maybe they could contact us and ask us to see if we could intervene. In the 20-some years that we have been doing it, there's only been one that I know of where the person refused to meet with us. We contact the person and let them know that we've had a complaint. First thing that's always said is, well, who complained and what did they say? So when somebody contacts us, we let them know that we have to tell the person who's complaining and what they've said. Sometimes if a judge is the problem, they're hesitant to identify themselves because of the judge hearing their cases in the future. But when I contact them, I invite them to go to lunch or to go have coffee. I explain to them that I'm not in any way going to be able to discipline them, but I'd just like to meet with them and talk about the complaints that we have had. Those interventions, I call them, I think have been very successful over the years. We have on one occasion invited a state bar representative to go with us. Root Edmondson wanted to go one time, and we allowed him to go. And he said that he told the person that he was not going to say anything, he was just going to observe. One of the things that we've talked about, I've talked with Barbara about it, is the state bars going with me on some of these interventions. And I will be glad to do that when the situation is right. But oftentimes people are very worried about discipline of the state bar. So we will continue to try to do that. And I will be calling the state bar if I need somebody in a particular district from the counselor or others to help me and figure out who would go with me. And so when we go and we meet and we talk about the problem, the idea is if there's some suggestions that I can make or directions I can add for the person to do, we do that. We do all we can to help them not continue the pattern that they've been involved in. We think it has been helpful. We hope that we can continue it. We appreciate the state bar's support through the years. We get a number of referrals from the state bar where they recognize that there's a problem, but it's not a rule violation. So we thank you for that. We've enjoyed working with you all these years, and we appreciate what you do because it's a lot of work for each of you, and I know it is, but I thank you for that. I, of course, would be glad to answer any questions. If not today, and you want to contact me later to talk about a situation, please feel free to do so. We'll be glad to try to help you.
Are there any questions for Mel? We thought this would be helpful and informative. It's just a small part of what the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism does, but this may be something now that you know about it, that you can contact Mel if you know somebody that might benefit. And as he said, and as we offered, even if a member of the council didn't go with him, you may know another lawyer in your district that it could accompany him if he felt like it warranted. And just a special thanks to you, Mel, because you're a lot of what makes this possible. I think you go out, you treat people respectfully and honestly and candidly, and I just think it's been a really successful program and appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Well, we will move on to some situations where maybe intervention didn't work, and we will recognize Catherine Jean for her report.
Thank you, ma'am. You have in your materials a report of the first quarter activities of the Office of Counsel, and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Madam President.
We will turn our attention to committee reports. And the first up is Executive Committee. And our first item of business is approval of the minutes of the council meeting from January 15th, 2021. Those were posted on SharePoint. It is the motion of the Executive Committee that those minutes be approved. That motion does not require a second. Any questions, comments, corrections? I think we are ready to vote. All right, it appears that motion has passed unanimously. Thank you. Okay. Then we need to, Alice, we don't need to approve the minutes of Executive Committee.
No, ma'am. Executive Committee approves those.
Right. All right. We will turn to our financial report, which will be presented by Darren Jordan.
Thank you, Barbara. The Finance and Audit Committee met. The first matter that we took up was the first quarter financial statements for the State Bar. That information is included in the SharePoint files, and we would ask, we have reviewed those and we passed them out of committee and on to the Executive Committee, and we now bring them to the to Bar Council for approval of the first quarter financial statements for 2021. That is out of our committee and it doesn't require a second, Madam President.
Are there any questions, comments? Seeing no hands raised, we will vote. Thank you. That appears to have passed unanimously.
Next matter the Finance and Audit Committee took up was the presentation of the annual audit. The annual audit is also in the share file folder for these meetings. Our auditor audited the financial statements of the North Carolina State Bar for the year ending December 31st of 2020. That includes not only the North Carolina State Bar books, but also the books of the other groups and boards that are part of the State Bar, such as the North Carolina Board of Continuing Legal Education, Legal Specialization, Paralegal Certification, also the North Carolina State Bar Plan, the IOLTA group, and also the Client Security Fund for that. I would point out that we have a clean audit. The Finance and Audit Committee took a look at that. We also had a presentation from our auditors with regards to that. We have no management problems, and it was a clean audit. It indicated the financial statement disclosures are neutral, consistent, and clear. We encountered no difficulties in dealing with management and performing and completing our audit. And we want to thank not only Alice and her staff, but also especially Jaya for all the work that she does with our books. And she is a key component to getting a clean audit like we did. And so we would present that for approval and ask the council to approve the annual audit for the year ending December 31st, 2020.
Okay, that motion is on the floor, does not need a second. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, let's vote on that. That has passed unanimously. Thank you. We'll move on into appointments.
Thank you. The Appointments Advisory Committee met. We took up several appointments in this quarter. The first one that I want to bring to the council's attention is the Disciplinary Hearing Commission. There were essentially 4 appointments to be made. 2 of those appointments had individuals in those slots who were eligible for reappointment. And the first matter I'd ask the council to take up is the reappointment of Maya Engel and Shannon Joseph, who will be reappointed to the second of their 3-year terms. So that would be a motion coming from the Appointments Advisory Committee.
Thank you. So the motion is to reappoint Maya Engel, Shannon Joseph to Disciplinary Hearing Commission. Does not require a second. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, let's vote. All right, thank you. That is passed unanimously.
Thank you. We had one other placement of the Disciplinary Hearing Commission that was open. Richard Bennett was not eligible for reappointment. And after deliberation, the Appointments Advisory Committee would submit the name of William Oden, who is an attorney from Wilmington, to be appointed into that slot, a 3-year term as the Disciplinary Hearing Commission.
Motion is before you, needs no second. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, let's vote on that. That has passed unanimously.
All right, just for information purposes today, we had a resignation from the Disciplinary Hearing Commission. Allison Tomberlin has tendered her resignation as of the day that we met. The Appointments Advisory Committee met. So her position is open. The Appointment Advisory Committee decided that we would table replacement for her slot until the July meetings. And I'm happy to explain that at a later date. But it was for purposes of a future appointment in that seat and how that would play into the length of that appointment. Because of Allison Tomberlin's resignation, however, she was vice chair of the DHC. We took it upon ourselves to go ahead and appoint or recommend the appointment of a replacement for the vice chair position. And we received a recommendation from the DHC that Stephanie Davis, who is currently on DHC, be appointed to a 3-year term as vice chair of the DHC. So that would be our recommendation to the council.
So you have a motion to appoint Stephanie Davis as vice chair of DHC. That does not require a second. Any discussion? Okay, let's vote on that. All right, that has passed. Thank you.
Next appointment that we took up has to do with the Inmate Grievance Resolution Board. Currently, Gerald Beaver is the appointee in that slot. He is eligible for reappointment. We were not able prior to our meeting to reach out to Mr. Beaver to see if he was interested in continuing in that position. But because of the way the rules are written, we are to provide the governor with 10 names to fill this slot. This is a governor appointment upon the recommendation of the Bar Council. So we are tendering 10 names that will be sent to the governor. With Mr. Beaver being the current appointee, we're going to recommend to the governor that he would be our first selection for that position. We have one individual who has indicated and specifically requested to serve on that board, and we will be submitting his name as an alternative if Mr. Beaver decides that he does not want to continue. That individual is Travis Ellis. So I'm going to read the 10 names that we'll send to the governor, and we ask that that the council consider that and allow us to send these to the governor. It would be Gerald Beaver, Travis Ellis, Wendy Bartos, Dayton Cole, Bill Faison, Jackie Hauser, Erica Jones, Deborah Newton, Riley Smith, Serena Williams, and Rebecca Wolf. Those would be our recommendations for names to be sent to the governor. We'd ask the council to approve those.
Okay, so the motion is to send the names that were just read to the governor, and he will appoint someone to that. So, no seconds required. Any questions or comments?
David Allen needs to know that that is not Serena Williams, the tennis player.
Yeah. Be a good one. All right, let's vote. And that has passed unanimously.
Thank you. The next appointment we took up was the North Carolina Courts Commission. That commission currently has an individual who is eligible for reappointment, but after deliberation, the Appointments Advisory Committee is recommending the appointment of John Neiman, who is the public defender in Greensboro, to fill that term, and it would be a 4-year term on the North Carolina Courts Commission. That would be our recommendation from the Appointments Advisory Committee.
Okay, you've heard that motion, recommendation for appointment. Any questions or comments? No, then let us vote on that. All right, that has been approved unanimously.
All right. The next matter that we took up was the appointment for the legal aid of North Carolina. Currently, Chris Clifton, an attorney in Winston-Salem, is in that position. Mr. Clifton is eligible for reappointment. It would be the recommendation of the Appointments Advisory Committee that Chris Clifton be reappointed to a 3-year term for the legal aid of North Carolina position.
That is the motion Appointments Advisory Committee. Any questions or comments? Then let us vote on that. All right, that is passed unanimously.
All right. The final position is with regards to the North Carolina State Bar Foundation Board. Bill King, who presently fills that position, he is not eligible for reappointment in that. That position has to be filled by a past president of the state bar. It is the recommendation of the committee after receiving a recommendation from the board that Keith Capp, former state bar president Keith Capp, be appointed to a 4-year term in that position. That would be our recommendation.
All right, you've heard that motion to appoint Keith Capp. Doesn't need a second. Any questions or comments? Let's vote on that. All right, that passes unanimously.
I would just point out that I would suggest that the counselors look at the agenda for the Appointments Advisory Committee this particular meeting. There are a number of appointments that are going to be need to be made in July, and I would also draw your attention to the fact that the Appointments Advisory Committee is doing a really good job of looking at appointments and considering the diversity of these boards. There are lists with regards in the agenda and the materials for the appointment advisory. It lists individuals who are interested along with any demographic information we might have. It also lists the board the members of the boards as they currently are situated, and also where we're able to, we have listed the demographic information, and demographic also includes geographical demographic information, which is important too. And we would ask you to take a look at that. If you have any recommendations or suggestions, please let us hear from you. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Thank you, and thanks to that committee. So the next item from the executive committee has to do with some proposed rule amendments. So I'm going to first bring 4 of these to consider together. And these are, the first one is proposed amendment to permit notices for district bar elections for state bar counselors to be sent by email. And let me just say that all of 4 of these were approved at the last meeting. They were published and there were no negative comments made or received. The second was, the other 3 all were amendments to legal specialization certifications and have to do with being able to receive peer references by email, and then to create a new specialty in child welfare law. So again, all 4 of these were published. There were no negative comments received. So it is the motion of the executive committee that these be adopted by the council. Do I have any questions, comments on that? Seeing none, let's vote on that. Okay, that has been approved unanimously. Thank you. And I know we're moving fast, so if you are aware of something on the agenda that you're going to want to comment on, as soon as I start talking about it, virtually raise your hand so that we can see it. The next item is a proposed amendment to the rules governing continuing legal education program. This proposed amendment adds diversity, inclusion, and elimination of bias training. And for the year 2022, would add a requirement that all active members of the state bar receive 1 hour in training of CLE. So that was published. It did receive negative comments, and as is our practice, that was referred back to the CLE board. They did consider it. They made no changes. So executive committee approved it yesterday, and it is before you now, the motion of the executive committee for adoption. Any questions or comments? I do see a hand raised. Matt Smith.
Thank you, Madam President. Just for clarification, is this on for submission to the Supreme Court?
Yes, after we would approve it, then it would have to go to the Supreme Court for their approval.
So it's not going to be republished in any way, shape, or form? No,
because it has not changed. So it's been published and yeah, correct.
Madam President, I'm going to have to speak out against this. My district, when this first came up in October, I let them know about it, and without exception, across gender lines, across race lines, and across age lines, they were against this having an additional hour being imposed. I understand it's very laudable, and we all need it, but on behalf of my district, I think I must oppose this.
All right, thank you. I heard that, Matt. And I do want to say, of course, this is just discussion, but we have been discussing ways, we have heard that from you, and we've been discussing ways that perhaps we might offer that training in some form that would be at no cost to attorneys. So all to be worked out, but that's on the table. Any other hands? Clark Bell.
Yes, I concur with Matt's statement. The comments with respect to my district are the mandatory subsets of CLE being imposed upon us and relative to, minor aspects of our practice, that is technology, and then, the previous requirements, especially of substance abuse, and the specific 1 hour requirement, while laudable, and I understand the need, but it being mandated, it would not be well received in my district.
Thank you, Clark. Lee Botnan, I see your hand.
Yes, ma'am. I would like to actually make a motion to table this. With it coming up and not really having much knowledge ahead of time, I'd ask we table it until the July meeting so that I actually can go through my bar. I've had a few comments, but I would like to do that before we actually have a vote. So I would make a motion to table at this time so we can do it at the face-to-face meeting.
Second.
Okay, I'm gonna turn to Alice, whose face I don't see right now. Do I need to hear the motion to table first?
Yes, ma'am. It's precedence over the motion on the floor.
All right. Looking to see if there's any other hands raised. So there is a motion to table this till the July meeting that has been seconded. Anyone want to speak to that motion?
Barbara, if I may just jump in as the director of the CLE board, I just want to point out to the group, and I'm not urging anyone to vote a particular way other than the fact that this rule has been out in circulation since after the October meeting. It's been published in its form. It's been published in the journal. We've received dozens of comments. So it's been circulated via the different associations and different organizations. I don't think this is necessarily should come as a surprise to anyone. It's been out here for about 6 months, and this is a product of a CLE subcommittee that began in the summer. So as far as just not having had time to review it, I think the rule has been known, and we've been receiving comments, both positive and negative, from the membership for the last few months.
And thank you for clarifying that, Peter. It's easy to talk about the negative comments, but there have been quite a few positive ones also. Any questions for Peter? Further discussion? All right.
Hey, Barbara, this is Heidi. I do, sorry, probably with 4 Hollywood Squares pages couldn't see me. Peter, in all these discussions, I'm admittedly a little bit late to this conversation. Was there any thought given to including it as one of the CLE, one of the ethics hours as opposed to a standalone hour? And also, what have the discussions been, to Barbara's point, about making it free? Because the feedback I've gotten has been, why can't we include it in ethics? And why are we paying for this?
So there's actually a study underway with the CLE board to look at holistically look at our CLE rules and requirements to address some of these issues. The CLE board was very aware of the fact that this, if passed and approved by the court, would take up another hour of someone's 12 hours, potentially keeping them from taking hours in their field of practice. And so one of the things that we're looking at in a study that's started already, that hopefully will be done this year, is to look at ways to change our credit hour requirements so lawyers have more freedom to take the courses that they need at the time that they need it. For instance, perhaps changing the reporting period to a 2-year period, and stating that, in that 2-year period, you have to take 24 hours and you have to take 1 of each of the specialty credits in that 2-year period. So, you would take, instead of having to take technology every year, you'd have to take it 1 every 2 years, maybe the same for this diversity training. And so there would be more courses available for you to take your general hours in that time frame. And we've also, as part of this, looked at ways perhaps the state bar can provide at least 1 hour of each specialty credit. And I'm calling, technology, diversity and inclusion, substance abuse, mental health, the specialty credits, where we can provide those on our website at least 1 hour for free for our members. And so we're doing our best that if this comes into a rule, that we will do our best to make it the easiest for members to take without being too disruptive in their typical CLE year and too disruptive to their wallets to take.
Patrice, I see your hand, and before I recognize you, I was going to sort of add to what Peter said and make it clear that because of this study that's going on and consideration, this proposed amendment is for 2022 only. I believe I'm correct in saying that the CLE board felt this was important and it needed to go ahead and be implemented, but because they're not sure how the whole CLE is going to be changed, that this is a 1-year requirement at this point for 2022. Patrice?
Well, I may need some help in recalling all of the discussion, but I thought somewhere in discussion, perhaps 6 months ago, we were looking at language in the preamble that would state it more as a desired outcome more so than a mandatory declaration as it relates to both cultural awareness and bias in our practice and the administration of justice. And I'm wondering how this reconciles with that discussion and where we are as it relates to being final with our position on that. And the discussion, if I recall correctly, arose from over 10 years worth of debate about it. And we sort of, I thought, had some caution in the air in the sense that we did not want to have a knee-jerk reaction to current events, but at the same time, we wanted to present the profession in such a way that we are conscious of the biases that may be presented both by practitioners and by other players in the court system and the administration of justice. And I want to know how this reconciles with that.
Certainly. You're talking about the preamble, and that's actually the next item on our agenda. So we will be talking about that in just a moment. But I think that there has been some expression, Patrice, that perhaps our focus should be on educating ourselves rather than jumping right into working on disciplinary rules. So again, this was just felt by the CLE board and others to be very important. Did pass executive committee yesterday. So I do see, Dorothy, your hand was next.
I actually think Mr. Kemp was next, Madam.
Okay, Bert.
Good morning. As a new bar counselor, I am also on the CLE board, and I just want to second what Peter Bullock was saying regarding what we are doing on the CLE board. We are actively meeting. We are breaking up into subcommittees, and we were doing a complete overhaul or should I say that we were studying a complete overhaul, obviously subject to everyone's approval, and how we've been doing business for the last couple of decades. And so I would just ask that everyone take that into consideration, that this is just temporary. However, the issue is important. And I do understand and acknowledge some of the concerns that my fellow colleagues on the Bar Council have. And I urge everyone to please speak to me or other CLE board members when we're looking at this, because we're not looking at it just for this issue. We're looking about how we're going to be doing business potentially, and maybe making a proposal to this very august group in the next, well, hopefully in the coming year. So I just as a member of the board, I just wanted to completely concur to what Mr. Bullock was saying. Thank you.
Thanks, Bert. Dorothy?
Yes, thank you. I too was going to reiterate what Peter was saying. I am not on the full CLE board, but I was serving as a member of the committee that was studying whether or not this should be taken up as a part of it being becoming mandatory for a certain number of hours. And Peter and Mr. Kemp both said it well, that this was, we decided that this is very important. And respectfully, I understand people's concern about not making people do certain things. But I think that this is a very important matter. It's a very important piece of who we are. And I would actually submit that it could be considered not only a part of ethics, but as part of mental health. It's very important for people to understand what racial bias is, implicit bias is, for themselves in their, especially as it relates for what we're concerned about in their dealings with their clients and with each other. And so I respectfully would ask that you not see this as some minor matter or something that is so minute. I was not a part of any of the discussions when it came to making substance abuse and mental health hours mandatory. I don't even know when those became requirements, but I would hope that folks would see this as just as important, if actually in a lot of ways more important than those. There are lots of people who may not ever deal with substance abuse issues or may not have mental health issues, but like mental health issues, you will encounter a situation in which you are dealing with some sort of implicit bias, discrimination, et cetera, no matter what. And so I would ask that you all really strongly consider those things. And I know, Madam President, you touched on it and you noted how we did receive a lot of positive comments, but I would ask that folks pay a lot more close attention to those positive comments that we've received about this particular matter, as well as the preamble and the other things that we'll get to later.
Thank you. Marcy Armstrong?
I agree. These are very important issues. I have a couple of questions. Did the CLE board consider making this a one-time mandatory as opposed to every year or 2 years? That's one question. And the other one is, would it make sense to see the changes the CLE board is thinking about making before this is put out? I mean, I don't know. It just seems to me like it may allay some of the fears of some of the attorneys if they understand what broader changes are going to be made that Peter had mentioned earlier. So those are my two thoughts.
Peter may want to address this. I mean, I did hear them talk about whether it should be a 1 year requirement, and they thought at that point it was important that it be more than a 1 year requirement. And I just don't think you're ready yet, Peter. Are you for all of it?
No, you're right. So we felt that at least the board felt that this requirement needs to be instituted as quickly as possible, and thought that 2022 was appropriate. But with the understanding that we aren't sure how the organization of the CLE program will be at the end of the year or after the study. But regardless of how those changes what changes might happen, I don't think the board would change their opinion that at least this requirement needs to be done in 2022. There's a possibility, I would say, a likelihood that the way that we restructure CLE would not require all of your specialty hours to be taken annually, which would give you some more flexibility. Whether this is a periodic requirement like substance abuse, or you make all of the specialties a periodic requirement, or there's some broader reporting period. That remains to be seen. But there was a strong conviction from both the subcommittee studying this rule and the CLE board that at the bare minimum, which is what this rule is, that 1 hour should be taken in 2022.
Thank you. Julie Bell? You're muted. Let me hear from Todd Brown and you can figure out how to unmute. We'll come back to you. Todd?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't want to reiterate what's been said. I rise in support of what Peter has said and what others have said. And I want to say this, process matters. We are at this point having followed the process that we always follow to bring these matters before the council. And folks have had an opportunity for months to form an opinion as to whether or not they think it's a good idea, whether they think it's a bad idea. Folks have had an opportunity to comment, and the CLE board and others have considered all of those. And they have concluded that now is the time to go forward with this particular initiative. And they have recommended it to us. It is properly before us. Now is the time to go ahead and vote on this. I respect all of my colleagues, as they all know, but I'm not sure that you get a second bite at the apple to go back and have additional time to reconsider it and talk amongst your counselors about what their views are, having had months and months and months, and we having followed the proper process to get to this point. And so I believe that we ought to go ahead and vote today and not defer this to the future. That's all I want to say.
Thanks. Julie Bell?
Julie, you're unmuted, but we can't hear you.
Yeah. Oh, she said there's a problem with her microphone. Okay, we'll go to Anna Hamrick. Julie, you can certainly, right, put it in the chat. That's what I was just gonna say. So Anna?
Okay, can you guys hear me? Okay, all I want to say is I want to echo, I couldn't have said it better, what Dorothy said. I just want to support what she said. I think it was very well said and completely true. I think we need this. And then I also want to echo what Todd said about the process. I think we've gone through the process like we normally do. There's no reason to deviate from it at this point. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
It has been pointed out that we need to remember what we have as a motion to table, and I'm not sure that that's necessarily debatable, but I'm always in favor of hearing questions and comments. So at this point on the motion to table, and Julie is speaking directly to that, but you can see hers in the chat. I think we are probably, I believe we had a motion and a second on that. So on the motion to table until the July meeting, let's vote on that. Okay, so this one good thing about the Zoom is we don't have to count hands, it counts for us. So the motion to table has been defeated.
And that amount was 37 to 18.
Correct, thank you. So we have the motion from the executive committee to approve this rule. And then, as someone said, it would be submitted to the court for approval. So, any additional discussion on that motion?
Barbara, may I be heard?
Absolutely.
I would just point out to the individuals that asked that it be tabled that This is a motion to send it to the Supreme Court. And if the Supreme Court doesn't act on it or refuses to do it, then, it's going to be in their hands to determine whether this becomes a rule or not. And so I would just encourage you to think about that. The Supreme Court are going to be the ones who decide. So that's all I have to say.
Barbara, can I just follow that up? I just, to remind everybody, I thought Todd's comment about process was good. So I want you to know the process, which is that we only send our proposed rule amendments to the court every other quarter, just because we don't want to inundate them with those rule amendments. As lawyers, we tend to tinker a fair amount. So the next time we will submit rules to the court will be after the July quarterly meeting. So the rules that would be approved at this quarter, I would hold and submit those with any approved at the July meeting.
All right.
May I ask a question for clarification?
Yes.
It's Patty. As I read this, this is just to pass for 2022, and certainly we hope by 2022, Peter's CLE board would have more information on whether this would be continuing an every year process or maybe every other year. And is that what we're saying today?
Yeah.
That's what we're voting on? So it's just for 2022 with the option that things could change in the relatively near future about whether it's going to be.
That's right.
Pardon?
That they'll be back.
That's right.
Okay.
If nothing is done after by the CLE board to pass an additional rule or any new rule changes, then there would be no additional requirements beyond 2022.
Or it could go to every other year. So that
Right.
That's
It could be. It could without any additional work after this rule, it would just sunset completely unless a new rule comes into place.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right. Let's go ahead and vote on that motion. Well, Bert, did you want to be heard?
Just briefly, I want to, again, I know I'm new, but I want to be very clear. I understand the concerns. And I understand the concerns of, and I'm just going to be specific of Mr. Bell. I too am concerned about the state bar increasing our mandatory designated CLEs on a yearly basis. And so everything that I have heard in the concerns are all going to be discussed. And I welcome anyone to speak to anybody on the CLE board. And I think everything is on the table. And as we said, we are looking at this to try to rework the way we do business, to maybe reflect more how we do the specialty, the specialist hours in a group. And so I think everything is open, and this is just a temporary and important but temporary measure to ensure that we get this very important diversity hour in the hands of the folks that need it and learn from it. And like Peter said, should be sunset in 2022 if there was going to be no further action. But we are working diligently, and Peter is doing the best we can during COVID. Thank you.
Marcy?
I believe there was a question. Judge Hennett had a question in the chat. I just want to make sure her question gets answered.
Will the fee be assessed?
Judge Hennett, I assume you mean the typical credit hour fee that would be applied, and yes, that would still be applied for taking this. I think it's important to note that wouldn't increase any costs for lawyers, because this is not an additional 13th hour. This is just still part of the lawyer's 12-hour requirements. It's not a new 13th hour. This would just be a requirement as part of that 12. So there wouldn't be any additional cost, hypothetically, in theory, for lawyers, because this is still part of their annual 12-hour requirements.
Okay, then I think we are ready to vote on the motion to approve. Okay, that has passed and the vote is 44 for and 11 against. Thank you. All right. Our next item is the one that Judge Hennett was referring to, and this would be a proposed amendment to our preamble. This one was published for comment after the July 2020 meeting, got a lot of comment. It went back to the subcommittee. They considered it and made substantial changes, essentially a rewrite. So it is back before you, and the motion from the executive committee would be to publish this. This would be republished because it's significantly different. And I'm just going to ask Brian if he can just put the language up, because I don't think it's all in your materials, and maybe just give us a short little explanation. So we'd be adding what you see in red.
That's right, Barbara. Just for everybody who's reading this on the screen, this has been submitted to the Ethics Committee this quarter. The Ethics Committee approved this for publication, and subsequently to Executive, which also, like Barbara said, approved it for publication. The language reads as follows. This is a new proposed section of the preamble to the Rules of Professional Conduct, which of course is the aspirational portion of the Rules of Professional Conduct. This is not enforceable. The North Carolina Constitution requires that right and justice shall be administered without favor, denial, or delay. Public confidence in the justice system is strengthened when all participants are treated equally, fairly, honestly, and respectfully within the system. A lawyer, as a representative of and crucial contributor to the justice system, should foster public confidence in the administration of justice by treating all persons the lawyer encounters in a professional capacity equally, courteously, respectfully, and with dignity, regardless of a person's race, sex, national origin, religion, age, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, marital status, or socioeconomic status.
Okay, thank you. Brian, you can go ahead and take that down so I can just see if there's any hands. And I will say that part of this was discussed at great length, was we realized that the preamble is aspirational and then it should not read like a rule. And so that was part of the reason for the significant change. So the motion is to republish. I don't see any questions or comments on this. Seeing none, let's go ahead and vote on that. All right, thank you. That appears to have passed unanimously. The next two items I'm going to take together, and these are proposed amendments to the discipline and disability rules and proposed amendments to the rules for the administrative committee. And both of them deal with requirements for a lawyer who has been inactive or suspended for 7 or more years. And they just kind of clarify those requirements with respect to the bar exam and have made a few changes since we now have the uniform bar exam. So those proposed amendments were in your material, and it is a motion of the executive committee that these be published. Any questions or comments on those? All right, seeing none, let's vote on that. Okay, that motion is passed unanimously. Next rule amendment is just an amendment to the CLE program that would require sponsors to remit their sponsor fees within 90 days of completion of the program. That is a motion for publication. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, let's vote on that. All right, that has passed unanimously. And then our final as an amendment to the comment to Rule 1.1 of the Rules of Professional Conduct. And this new comment would state that competency includes awareness of implicit bias and cultural differences relative to a client that might impact the lawyer's representation of the client. And the motion of the executive committee is to publish this for comment. Any questions, comments, discussion? Seeing none, let's vote on that motion. Okay, that's passed unanimously and will be published. All right, that concludes the report of the executive committee, and I will now call on Everett Thompson, Chair of Administrative Committee.
Oh, good morning, everyone. I will not take as long as we did with the executive committee. We had our meeting on April 12th. The full report from the administrative committee is in your attached to your agenda. It starts on page 18, and you can see all the names and all the people that we dealt with. But I'll just give you the brief summary here. We had a number of petitions that, of course, will need to be approved by the council. But at any rate, we had petitions for inactive status, and we had 39 lawyers who were transferred to inactive status. 3 were granted that upon satisfying their requirements, and 3 were granted non-pro-tunc, so that their inactive status was effective at the end of last year. We had 1 petition for emeritus pro bono practice by inactive member, and that was granted. We had petitions for reinstatement from inactive status. 21 lawyers were reinstated from inactive status. And we had petitions for reinstatement from suspended status. 13 were granted reinstatement from the suspended status, but of those, 1 was granted upon completing requirements by our July meeting, and 1 petition was deferred to the July meeting. So I haven't ruled on that one, but deferred it. We had 1 petition for pro bono practice by an out-of-state lawyer, and that was granted. And we had a unique petition, 1 petition for relinquishment of membership, which meant this person wanted to give up their membership, not go inactive, but just give it up, which means they'd have to go back and jump through all the hoops to come back if they wanted to. That was approved for your review. We also, as you can see, we just talked about the proposed amendments for reinstatement for suspension and reinstatement from inactive status, which we submitted to the executive board, and Barbara just told you about those. I will tell you that in your attachment, there is a listing of 20 lawyers who may be getting suspension orders for failure to comply with membership or CLE. Now, all of them but 1, all of them are not paying their CLE fees, but 1 had not paid their state bar fee. And there's 2 on that list. I'll just tell you that have asterisks by them, and you don't need to contact them. But let me back up and say, if these people, any of these are in your district, we suggest that you give a courtesy call to them to remind them that they need to pay their CLE fees, or they're going to get something in the mail. Anyway, and if there's any concerns about the CLE compliance, they can refer to Deborah Holland, our Managing Director of CLE. And if there's any just general questions, they can contact Tammy Jackson, our Director of Membership. And in doing this, the administrative committee, Deborah and Tammy and Peter do a great job, makes my job easy. But anyway, we'll need to present those petitions for approval by the council.
Okay, so you have a motion that we accept the report of the administrative committee.
I do.
Thank you. And that does not need a second. Any discussions, questions, comments? Let's vote on that.
If if you note, Julie Bell, Judge Bell is recusing on this vote.
Okay, I see that. Thank you. All right, that has passed unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, Everett, and thanks to that committee. Okay, now we'll hear the report from the Authorized Practice Committee.
Hi, everybody. The Authorized Practice Committee met on Wednesday, and the minutes are in your council materials. We had 16 inquiries that were on the agenda for committee action. And of those 16 inquiries, 7 letters of caution were issued. 2 matters were referred to regulatory agencies. 7 matters were dismissed, and 2 matters were approved yesterday by the executive committee to have staff pursue injunctive relief. There was a report of the prepaid legal services plan, and Savannah Perry reported that 4 plans were received and approved for registration. 1 plan for registration was denied, and 1 plan that had already been registered was revoked because it's no longer active in North Carolina. Finally, we as a committee are continuing to evaluate ways to improve administration of the prepaid service plans. And a subcommittee was recently appointed that was asked to address issues of lawyers' ability to own prepaid service plan companies, to address registration fees and timing for submitting applications. And other than that, there was no other business, and there is no need to approve this report. So all I'm going to do now is just wish everyone a nice weekend. That's all I have.
Thank you. All right. We will call on Dorothy Hairston Mitchell for a report from the communications.
Good morning again, everyone. I am happy to report on behalf of the Communications Committee. We met this week as well, and just to give you all some updates on what's going on and what we plan to do moving forward. So I will start with we have a subcommittee chaired by Takia Lewis on live streaming DHC hearings. As you all may know, there were a few DHC hearings that were live streamed, and we had some people that actually got on and observed those. And so this committee is studying whether or not we should continue to live stream those hearings, and whether or not it should be during a pandemic and emergency situations, or just in general all the time. As you all know, those hearings are open to the public. And so they were live streamed recently because of the fact that we were in a pandemic and folks couldn't go into the building. And so they are going to continue to study that. We also continue to have our podcast being hosted by our wonderful Mark Enriquez. And we have had a few of those posted. They are on the State Bar website. This past quarter, we had 1 already posted, and that was one that included our wonderful President Barbara Christie and our President-elect Darren Jordan. There is another one that Peter is going to release on ethics, so be on the lookout for that one. Our desire with podcasts is to produce at least 1 or 2 per quarter. And so we would love for any topics that you all think will be great topics. We kind of threw around different things about whether or not we should continue with a get to know you theme, or should we produce content on controversial issues and have both sides, or just different things like that. So if you have some topics that you think will be really, really interesting and that would get us some new persons hopping onto YouTube or to, not YouTube, to our podcast, please do so and send those to us. And if you would like to be a person on there with, be a, one of the presenters with Mark, I'm sure he would love that as well. We also have courtroom conference room technology study has not been initiated yet. It will be initiated and is planned for in the 2021 or 2022. Kind of in that same vein, there has been a database software project that is going very, very well. Peter is working on making sure that that goes live soon, hopefully in August. And that will be where you all would be, it's kind of more streamline all the different documents and things that we have to submit and requirements that we have. And so it'd be pretty much a one-stop shop in order for you to make all those elections and put that information there. And then not last, but before I get to the fun part, communication with district bars. We are continuing to look for, I want to back up. On the courtroom technology equipment update, we do have some wonderful new equipment there at the State Bar. Some cameras that are that are mobile that we can take to the different courtrooms or the different rooms at the State Bar, and so we can use those if we live stream. And they are called Owls. And Mr. Jordan and I had the pleasure of being able to observe those and see how they work when we were there at the State Bar last Friday for an IDS commission meeting, and they were phenomenal. They work really, really well. They actually sit in a location, but they move around and zoom, and they pick up on whoever is actually speaking, and so it zooms in on that person and it live streams that way. Really, really great. And we hope we'll look for other opportunities in order for those to be utilized. And so back on the we're always looking for more ways to better communicate with our district bars. And so as a part of that, we're going to have a pilot program in which Peter will send out a template to counselors who are willing to participate in this pilot program, and you will utilize that template, personalize it a little bit more, and send it out to your district members, and so to give them information about what the State Bar is doing and kind of what is taking place in our quarterly meetings and things like that. If you all, the counselors that's been on the council for some time, you probably remember some years ago where a lot of counselors would actually get the information and send email blasts out to their members, and so Peter is working on something that we can actually see how well that could work. And so we can get the information out, but not create more work for individual members, and not create too much more work for our staff persons. So be on the lookout for that. We also are looking at a way to streamline the information that the counselor responsibilities for communications committee. That's another one that you all may recall some years ago. Peter created this document that encourages us as State Bar counselors to do certain things, arrange for different activities, State Bar activities, participate or present CLEs and different things like that. Presenting at local civic groups and things like that. And so we want to encourage you all to report these activities when you actually do those. And so in order to do that, as of right now, you would have to send an email or send something to Peter and let him know that you want to report those things. And so we're looking at a way to have that be in an electronic format so that you can just go online, drop that information into a sheet or a form, and that information goes directly to Peter. And then finally, last but not least, we have, as of right now, we are live streaming right now. And been trying to keep a look. We are up to 108 subscribers on YouTube. We should have like something on Zoom where we have like the little confetti that jumps up and all of that good stuff. And I say that's an accomplishment because earlier this week we were at 105. So we are moving up and up and up. At any given time, we may have 20 or 30 people watching at a time. I think as of right now, I thought it was maybe like 11 or 12 people that were watching as of right now, because on their Friday, they just couldn't find anything more fun and exciting than jumping on to watch the state bar council meetings. But that is what I have to report. I appreciate all the committee members that is on the communications committee. And as always, I always want to give shout outs to Brian and Peter, who do a lot of the heavy lifting. I really appreciate you all. And you all have a great rest of your Friday and weekend.
Thank you. Thanks to you and your committee. We need to backtrack. And Andrea, I think on the authorized practice, if you're there, that we do need to have the council approve the motion to revoke the registration of the law plan. I don't know if you want to, if you're on there and you want to present that, or she might not be. Well, I will present it. It was a motion made yesterday. It came through authorized practice committee, and it was, she did mention that, and it's to revoke the registration of the law plan for failure to pay the annual registration fee. It does not require a second. Any questions or comments? All right, let's vote on that. All right, that has passed unanimously. And I will now call on David Allen to submit the report from the Ethics Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. I used to complain about having to follow Catherine Fry give these reports. That was a bad thing to have to do. Now I've got to follow Dorothy. Yeah. I mean, that's just, I want to move on the agenda somewhere so that I don't have to follow these folks who are too bad at table setters. Dorothy and Catherine get everybody all excited and happy, and then you got to look at me. It's not quite fair. I do have a shout out though for Dorothy's committee, and particularly for Mark. Brian and I got to do a podcast with Mark, and if you get called on to do that, don't fear. Mark actually can cover all your sins. He's an excellent interlocutor and does a great job. And he was particularly had a difficult time with me and Brian because he wanted to talk about how ethics, how FEOs get put together, what the ethics committee does. And Brian and I took a page out of Schoolhouse Rock and went back and did I'm Just a Bill, you know, that thing that was on there on the old Schoolhouse Rock. Mark though cut that for us. But moving on to the more serious bit of our work, the ethics committee did meet yesterday. We had a very full agenda and moved through it. The executive committee's already discussed two of the matters that we took up. We have one more matter for council action. We published an opinion in FEO in the last quarter, 2021 FEO 1, Contemporaneous Residential Real Estate Closings. That was published last quarter and did not receive any comments back from the public except two very positive comments, which thanked us for some clarification on that point. So we would move the council for adoption of 2021 FEO 1.
Okay, that motion is before you, does not require a second. Any questions or comments? Okay, let's vote on that. All right, that has unanimously been approved. Thank you.
And Madam President, I would like to make one further report. We have 13 active subcommittees that were working this last quarter. A couple of them met, many of them, all of them met once. Several of them met more than once. And so the putting together Zoom meetings for some 20 subcommittee meetings, each of which included at least 5 and some included 6 and 8 and 9 committee members was a difficult task. Staff did a wonderful job on that. need to really shout out to Denise on that. But also something that the council needs to know is that the ethics staff put on 13 CLEs in the last quarter. I'll repeat that number, 13 CLEs in 3 months. The bulk of those fall to Brian, although I believe Nicole actually did one this week during State Bar Week. So that's really tough work that the staff does. And because everything comes off as seamlessly as it does, we don't always appreciate all the work they do behind the scenes. But also as a recommendation to you, if your district needs an ethics hour for a CLE project, or you just have you need something to add to a CLE to one of the voluntary bars, State Bar Ethics Council's office is always happy to be part of that. The final thing is the audit. Our Ann Parkin, our auditor, reported the usual report that she gives about some failures to reconcile. Trust accounts continue to be a real problem for a number of our members. She will be visiting Robeson County in the next quarter, and Jay White, she'll be coming for you. She's coming to Cabarrus County. So those are the two counties selected for random audits for the next quarter. And finally, Madam President, we handled 1,200 ethics inquiries that came in to Suzanne and Nicole and Brian on the ethics hotline. So that's about the normal matter for the quarter. I think that shows lawyers' activity is picking back up again as we come out of the pandemic. That's our report. Thank you very much. And thanks to staff for all the support they've given us this quarter.
Yes, thank you, David. And thanks. That ethics hotline is one of the best programs that we do. So, thank you. It keeps people away from, I think, the next committee, which is chaired by Matt Smith. Matt, will you give us the report of grievance?
Thank you, Madam President. I would first like to note the irony of David Allen's comments regarding following people when I have to follow him. Maybe in the future I can move ahead of him wherever he might be. The grievance committee, of course, has done its work, and staff I cannot speak too highly of. They have just done an outstanding job during the pandemic, and they've even moved into doing some DHC matters. And so I want to thank them, and I think all the council should thank them as well. During the past quarter, we considered 192 items. Of those 192, 149 files were dismissed. 1 file was dismissed and retained. 2 files were continued. 7 lawyers were referred to the trust account compliance program. 6 received letters of caution. 8 received letters of warning. 5 received admonition. 4 received reprimands. 3 received censures, and 6 lawyers were referred to the Disciplinary Hearing Commission. So that is a report of grievance. I would like to tell folks again that when you're home talking with your counsel, keep in mind those numbers of 192 grievances filed, 149 of them were dismissed. So we're not sitting there trying to find flaws in what lawyers are doing, but a vast majority do get dismissed. So thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions for Matt Smith on that report? Okay, then I will call on Marcy Armstrong. The Issues Committee has really been working hard, and I'll ask her to give that report.
Thank you, Madam President. We do have several committees studying some very important issues. And first, I want to thank all the members of the committees and the staff for all of their hard work. They've really been working very, very hard. The first committee, a subcommittee on compensation of court-appointed defense counsel, is chaired by Alan Cobb and staffed by Alex Nicely and Jennifer Slattery, if I pronounced those right. The purpose of this committee is to determine whether excessive caseloads and low compensation rates are impacting the competent representation of defendants by private defense counsel. Subcommittee met on April the 9th. They prepared a survey which will be sent to a pilot group consisting of board certified specialists in federal and state criminal law, as well as specialists in criminal law juvenile delinquency. The next subcommittee is studying proposed regulatory change. It's chaired by Mark Enriquez and staffed by Brian. The purpose of this committee is to look at how other jurisdictions are changing the regulation of practice of law to improve access to justice. The committee met on, I think, twice since the last meeting, January the 26th and March the 23rd, and they heard from presenters from Arizona, Ontario, and a group named the North Carolina Justice for All Project. The committee will take a survey of its members now to see what options or priorities its members may think are important. And given all of the education they have received from a number of presentations and from reading a lot of materials. I know this has been a very, very time consuming, and they've spent a lot of time in this committee. The committee will also study the findings of the North Carolina Equal Access to Justice Commission's 2021 North Carolina Civil Legal Needs Assessment, which was presented to us today by Justice Earls. Next subcommittee is on diversity and inclusion, chaired by Todd Brown and staffed by Leonore Hodge. And the purpose of this committee is to look at ways the state bar can address race issues within the legal profession, as well as other diversity issues, including gender, geographical, size of firm, and any other diversity issues. The committee met twice since the last meeting on February the 16th. They heard a presentation from Dana Cutler. She's a past president of the Missouri Bar. And yesterday, I believe, they met as well. And they heard a great presentation from Leonore comparing the initiatives that are going on in Arizona, Florida, and Oregon. The committee is working on a mission statement and will continue its work with the goal of making recommendations to the Issues Committee. Our last subcommittee is studying the secured leave policy, which I believe is about 20 years old. It's chaired by Gordon Brown and staffed by Savannah Perry and Cameron Lee. The committee met on March the 12th and April the 1st, and they developed a list of stakeholders. They looked at policies in Virginia, Florida, and Georgia. They are now, this committee is now sending out a survey to various groups, including the counselors, several sections from the North Carolina Bar Association, Advocates for Justice, Association of Defense Attorneys, Association of Black Attorneys, North Carolina Association of Women Attorneys, the Young Lawyers Division, and I believe they're partnering with the Bar Association in sending out the survey. And Madam Chair, that is the report of the Issues Committee.
Thank you, Marcy, and thanks to all those chairs of those committees doing good work. All right, I want to call on Mike Ramos for the presentation of LAMP.
Thank you. Good morning. LAMP met yesterday afternoon. I don't have any action to report, but coincidentally, the LAMP committee is working on some of the very issues that Justice Earls brought up concerning veterans. So hopefully by July, we'll have something good to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. Then we'll move on to the report from our legislative committee. I'll call on Jay White to give that.
As I reported to the executive committee the other day, the legislative committee is probably the most exciting committee to be part of. And I know that y'all are all jealous that y'all all can't be on there, but you know, every once in a while you can just give me a call. But we're doing some great things. I would tell you quickly that the legislative committee is very interested in getting Senate Bill 417 passed, and we're going to be calling on you the judiciary, in the Rules Committee, not in the judiciary. And we are going to try and get that moved along because that will certainly help the bar in years to come. It's a little bit more detailed than it was in years past. And also we're going to seek the counselors to stay in contact with your legislators by calls, by emails, but also by cards that we'll be sending out to y'all. If y'all would please look at them and sign them and get them back to the bar so we can get them over to the legislators. That will make a very big impact and continue the working relationship that we have with them. With that, Madam President, that is all the report from the Legislative Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Jay? Okay, thank you. All right. I will call on Warren Savage to give a brief report from the Distinguished Service Awards Committee.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to move to go into closed session pursuant to General Statute 143-318.11A2 to prevent the premature disclosure of an honorary degree, scholarship prize, or similar award.
We have a second to that motion. Somebody just.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. All right. All right. Let's, all in favor?
Advise the committee is moving for the approval, with approval of the executive committee, that the council approve the nominations of the lawyers discussed in closed session, candidate A, candidate B, and candidate C, for the presentation of John B. McMillan Distinguished Service Awards, subject to our standard due diligence checks.
That is the motion of the Distinguished Service Award Committee. Any questions, comments, discussion? All in favor? All right, as expected, that passed unanimously. And Warren, did you want to talk to us a little bit about some of the
Yes.
presentations?
We've got a backlog of pending presentations to be presented, mainly because of the lack of in-person meetings to give these awards. So I think there's 7 pending presentations that are out there. Hopefully a few will get done virtually in May, at least 2, maybe 3 in Mecklenburg County. And then soon we'll start doing them in person and sending Barbara all over the state. I also want to encourage all of you to go home again and find these folks that we need to recognize. There's never too many awards here. We're not limited to the number we can give. We want to recognize those people that deserve recognition and might not get it through other organizations. So let's get out there, especially, we have seem to have a lot always from Mecklenburg and Wake County, which is nothing wrong there. Plenty of great attorneys deserving that award, but I want to make sure we get out to other areas of the state and to other populations of the state. So thank you very much, Madam Chair, and that concludes the Distinguished Service Award.
Thank you so much, Warren, and to your committee. You're doing a great job of nominations, and you're right, there are a lot of wonderful attorneys in our state, and I hope we can recognize some more of them. Okay, that concludes our committee reports. Is there any additional business that needs to come before the council today? As there's certainly, we found out many advantages of Zoom, but for the quarterly meetings, it sure is nice to meet in person. And I hope that perhaps this may be our last Zoom quarterly meeting, at least full quarterly meeting. So we are working hard to try to plan a meeting, in-person meeting in July. That would be in Asheville. So we're going to continue to work on that, see if we can do that in a manner that everybody feels safe. And one thing that would be helpful, I think you've gotten an email. We're just trying to collect information to see how many of our counselors have been vaccinated, or even if you've gotten one shot, not the other one yet, or you intend to. If you could just share that information with Sharon. Again, we're not taking names or keeping information. We just want to kind of know where we stand as a council. It'll help us in our planning. Anything else? You're all the very best. I give you permission to take off the rest of the day. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right. All in favor? You can
Aye.
make your last act be a vote. There we go. Thank you. I think that works.